right. So, how do I help my kids handle big life changes?
Well, you got to define what big life changes are.
Well, to be honest, it's different based on what stage of life your kids are. So, like for younger kids, moving to another room or switching beds could be a big life change.
Okay, so right there, though, so you're talking about big life changes from their perspective.
Yes,
Well, because it makes a difference. Like when we moved cross country, that's a big life change,
for the
but
family.
for the
Yeah.
family, yeah, right? So, yeah. So, uh, how do you? Yeah. So, presuming you're going through something with your kids.
No,
So no.
no. Charles decided that the theme of the episode today would be life changes, and so we decided that this would be the how do I,
Okay.
how do I help my kids with big life changes? Because apparently Charles is going through some life changes, and we'll hear about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, for you, what was big for you?
I think it ultimately boils down to communication, because there's things that you can change, there's things that you can mitigate, there's things that you can't, and you got to help your kids understand how to tell the difference between what they can control and what they can't control, and how to cope with the things they can't control, and how to effectively change the things that they can control.
Right.
And so, for instance, the one that I had said, changing beds, that is something that to a certain extent they can control, but also they can't, because they especially when they're little, they grow out of beds. They get too big for their crib or their toddler bed, or they break a bed and you have to buy a new one, whatever. But I think you can also shape it in a way that they have buy-in on the decision. So talk to them, look, it's necessary, you're attached to your bed or whatever, and we need to get a new one. So you can help them be part of the process of making that change. And that could be, I use a bed as an example, but one thing a lot of kids get attached to, say, a blanket.
Right.
And that can be or a security stuffed animal or whatever, a security item.
Yep.
And there is going to be a time when they are going to have to be separated from it, because they shouldn't be taking it to like school or things like that.
Right.
And so helping them cope with that. And there's a lot of different ways that I've heard of people doing that, but ultimately it's talking to them about it. We've done different things with each of our kids. The one that got attached to his blanket the most was our oldest.
Mm-hmm.
And he got super attached to it. He's 12 or 13 now, but I think he still has it in his bed. He doesn't drag it around anymore, but there was a good while where he had it with him all the time. And there was one corner specifically that he would rub up against his face, and it wore that corner out. We literally called it special corner.
Yep.
And so, yeah, helping him cope with the change that he couldn't bring that to school or bring it to his church class or whatever. It was a bit of a coping thing. Or even when it just had to be washed. When it needed to be washed because it got all funky from him sucking on that one corner every now and again.
Throw Jebediah right in with the wash and it'll be fine.
And so it like I said, it ultimately, the way you help your kid handle change is through talking to them about it and helping them find good ways to cope, good coping mechanisms.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's to your point, I mean, communication, yes. I think that's just kind of a universal. There has to be good communication. But I think that one of the things that you touched on is the things that they can have some sense of control over, and some sense of ownership of, at least for part of the change, whatever the life change happens to be. But there are those big decisions that more happen to them, which they don't really have a say in. And again, communication is still of the utmost importance. And so, but then it becomes, have they been heard? The decision may not change. Nothing may not change, but have they been heard? I'll give you for instance, when I moved to California this last time, the kids were young, and I sat them down and I said, so here's the deal. I have a job opportunity out in California. We have to move, which means starting a new school when we get there. How do you feel about that? And they were like, okay, what? My son was like, whatever. And even though he was like 9 or something like that, my daughter, she goes, well, so are you still going to be able to have dinner with us? And I went, yes, no question. Because that's all she really cared about. She didn't really care about the changing of the schools thing. And she wanted to make sure that we were still going to do the family stuff. And so didn't affect whether or not we were going, but it basically said to me, oh, okay. So her level of importance is not even what I was thinking of at all. Like, I thought she'd be concerned about leaving her best friends, and nope, it wasn't even part of her thought. So at the very least, that kind of communication can help inform you of how to proceed or in what way to proceed, even if the decision itself isn't changing. Right. So,
yeah. Well, and I love how you sat her down and talked to her, because like in my own life, when I was in 5th grade, my parents, their marriage was having issues, and my mom came and randomly picked up me and my younger siblings and from school and just started driving. She didn't tell us anything. Ooh. I'm like, and we asked her like, what's going on, and she just refused to answer. My mom was horrible when it came to communication, to be honest. And
she forgot to tell you you're adopted, right?
And so we ended up at my aunt's house 8 hours away, and because my mom had decided at the time that she needed to be separated from my dad. She wasn't sure. Ultimately, they didn't end up getting a divorce. They got back together, but and so we were like, okay, what's going on? And it wasn't until we got there that my mom was like, we're gonna be living here for a while. I'm like, okay. And so we got uprooted from our home. She packed some stuff for us. And it was just in and of itself, it would have been a big shock, but the lack of communication also was just,
do you really,
it made it that much worse. Like, realistically speaking,
would have it changed anything for you?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know, but it couldn't have hurt. But as an adult now, I understand that it would be hard for her to have that conversation, but you're also just driving. Like,
question. Are we sure that your dad died of cancer and not a pillow in the face?
My dad never had cancer. My mom did.
So she killed him. There you heard it. There you heard it. The trauma comes out. All right. Thank you, Joe. Breakthrough.
So, yeah. So the one thing I will say, Charles, because you had the question, would it have changed anything?
I have a story.
I think it would have. And the reason I think it would have is because Joe's mom could have made the kids feel like, don't worry, we will get through this together. Versus, well, we're just doing this.
Yeah, to a point. I mean, I can see that. I'm a little bit of a believer in kick the kid into the pool and let him swim. Just because that's how most of my life was. And we went through a bankruptcy with the kids, and with the older two, the younger two don't really remember it. And I had to tell them, I was like, this is a deal. Ask your questions, cry it out, but I gotta go find this next thing. And it really was, we'll be fine together. We always try to teach them adventure, this and that and the other. But when I was a kid at 12 years old, dad's a preacher, grew up in the church. Everything was a church. I believed. I was naive. I still am to a point. I was gullible to a point. It was like everything is Christians love and Jesus is light. And that's not always the truth. And didn't understand, even at 12, didn't see what was in front of me with the politics and the backstabbings and stuff. So my parents sat us down and said basically that my dad was basically going to get kicked out of the church. It's a long story. I can tell in another show. But at 12, I was like, but I understand. What did he do wrong? Well, he didn't do anything wrong. It's, and they tried to explain it in certain ways, and they weren't. Now I found being bluntly honest is the way to go. But ultimately, the reason I asked why would you think it would have changed anything? Because being on the other side of it, having being told this bad thing is happening, all it really did was open up a rage monster in me. I didn't understand why the church betrayed us. I didn't understand all the I didn't know how to process the rage and betrayal that came from it. I didn't know how to process the embarrassment of moving down the street from the old house to live with a friend where my sister slept on the couch and I slept on the floor because that's all the room they had. I didn't understand any of that. And it came through, but they did try. And I honestly don't remember if they even were trying to even convey, we'll get through this together. It was a mess is what it was. And what I've tried to do with my kids is a little bit of that suck it up buttercup, a little bit of a dose of reality along with the thing. I made a face. If you're not watching the show, if you're only listening to the podcast, what Kurt said, have they been hurt? I couldn't control the face. I was like, shut up, old man. That's basically what my face said. But everybody has their own ways of doing things. But like with my kids, at times it goes from, I heard you talking about the blanket, Joe, and I've had little bouts with my youngest about this pillow she latched onto, and I just kept giving her grief about it. It's not like making fun of her. It's like, look, that thing is nasty. It's worn out. You need a new pillow. Nah. It's like, whatever. At some point, you will get tired of hurting yourself trying to sleep on this thing, and she did. And I also try to teach them things are not memories. Things are not people. You need to latch onto yourself and those kind of, but that whole, my son, he's on junior varsity baseball now, and some butt face gave him gave him some grief. And then his friend, like, they're supposed to be teammates, which is the only thing that really made me mad about the whole story is the friend who didn't like how things went, shoulder checked in this exercise after the game, shoulder checked Ryland. And then, of course, he gets all pissed off because he was trying to handle it actually maturely. But the change I had to help him with was like, one, your papa just spent $1,000 on getting you catcher's gear that fits you. So there's no quitting. Number two, because he's like, his emotional, almost 13-year-old self was like, but they don't want me there. We're like, of course they don't want you there. They don't know you. You got to bring yourself to the table and show them why you're there. Right. And if they still don't want you there, and I do, my kids, I do movie references with all my kids. It's just how my house works. It's like every movie you've ever watched of some new kid, some African-American kid, some girl wanting to step up. They get beat up. They get bullied. The whole point of the story is how they overcome that crap. And you didn't even get that. You just got some butt face. I didn't use the word butt face. Some butt face having a bad day. Yeah, Kurt's shot. And he started smiling when I started referencing movies. Like, why would you assume that you're going to be somewhere because somebody wants you there? You're there because you want to be there. Now show them why you're there. And you don't get to quit because you're probably just spent a lot of money. We're not, and sometimes it's that tough love. And you know what, Kurt? Maybe he felt heard a little bit because but that's for me, that's part of that dose of reality. Is like, shut up. Stop whining. Let's get real about things. You're not there to make friends. You're not there to make them happy. You're there to learn how to be a better baseball player, be a better part of a team. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's true everywhere, but in our county, JV is just, they don't care. The coaches are really focused on varsity, and they just kind of work with the JV a little bit until they get into their freshman year and become varsity. So, but you got to get to varsity, man. That's where the real team is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess just different approaches. That's all.
Yeah.
I think that there's no reason not to be empathetic to the kids while still maintaining a level of control and just saying, I don't know what we're going to do. And like, clearly that's not, nobody's saying that here, but
yeah,
but I think, I tend to err on the side of empathy and compassion.
And that's a good way to, if you're going to make an error, because you said error, make an error. If you're going to do that, then make it on that side of the coin for sure.
Right,
well, and how you react, the energy you put out, your kids will more often than not mirror that.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, I did in that conversation for the first time in a long time. He broke out his answers, and that's literally what he does. And engaged a little bit. And I said, and thank you for getting your head out of your butt and stop giving me that answer and actually talking to us. Because that's all I ever want. That's all I ever wanted from any of the kids is, I'm not asking you to agree. Sometimes you're just going to do what you're told, and that's something you forget and you lose sight of. But secondly, I gave a speech about, do you feel good about it? I've tried that over the last couple of years. Hey, do you feel good about that decision? You feel good when you say, oh, they don't want me there? Oh, no. It's like, so you chose to feel bad today instead of to go and exercise and try to feel good. But you talked about giving them a choice. So I really focus choice with the kids. Like we had a similar situation. You went bankrupt, moving houses, where you had a job offer, went across California. We didn't let them help pick out the house. We didn't let them have any say in any of that. We had to go do what we had to do, but then we let them pick out decorations for the room. They get fresh start. We talk like, here's a fresh start. Here's a fresh new thing. And all of their lives, I've really tried to let them understand there is no such thing as permanence in this life. There just isn't. Some people are fortunate to grow up in one house their entire life. They inherit it from their parents. They hand it off to their kids, but that is very rare. And even then, that house is not the same, right? It has changed over the decades. So I don't know. Joe, all I really want to do right now is just show up at your house, pick you up, and just drive and not tell you a thing about where we're going. Just to see how, and just record the whole thing just to see how none of you get before you punch me in the face. Say pull over.
Oh, man. Dark times. Dark times.